Stop scrolling, because if even half of what's being whispered right now is true, the entire reality TV universe is about to need a PR exorcism. Picture this: it's late, the comments are flying, screenshots are accidentally leaking, and suddenly Kenya Moore decides she's done playing nice, done being quiet, done protecting other people's secrets. And boom, names get dropped. Not vague ones. Marc Daly Kandi Burruss, together in the same sentence. Now let me ask you this: when has Kenya ever gone live just to say good vibes only? Exactly. So why now? Why this message? And why are certain people suddenly going radio silent while others start posting cryptic quotes about truth, betrayal, and God knows everything? The internet says this is just messy gossip. Others are calling it the most calculated soft launch of a scandal we've seen in years. Allegedly, there are receipts. Allegedly, there are voices. Allegedly, somebody doesn't want this story told at all. So is this another dramatic reality TV moment? Or are we watching the beginning of a perfectly timed implosion? Because if this revelation goes where people think it's going, no one walks away clean. Stay right here, this gets uncomfortable fast. It all starts with names that already come with baggage. And that's exactly why the story refuses to die quietly. Kenya Moore is not new to controversy, not new to headlines, and definitely not new to being accused of doing too much. This is the same woman who has spent years being labeled dramatic, confrontational, and conveniently misunderstood whenever she opens her mouth. But here's the problem with dismissing her too quickly: Kenya has also been right before, more than once. And that uncomfortable little detail is why people leaned closer to their screens the moment she hinted that something ugly had been hiding in plain sight. Then there's Marc Daly, a man whose public image has always felt carefully curated, almost sterile. The quiet restaurateur, the controlled speaker, the guy who rarely claps back even when the internet is on fire. That silence used to read as maturity. Now people are calling it strategy. Because when accusations start flying and one person says absolutely nothing, the silence becomes louder than any denial ever could. Viewers are now replaying old interviews, pausing at awkward moments, rewatching scenes that once felt boring but suddenly feel loaded with subtext. The internet loves patterns, and Marc's calm, detached demeanor is being rebranded as something far more suspicious. And then we have Kandi Burruss, the entrepreneur, the empire builder, the one everyone points to as above the mess. That reputation is exactly why her name hitting this narrative felt like someone dropping a glass in a silent room. Kandi has always been positioned as untouchable, the woman who minds her business, counts her checks, and avoids foolishness. Which is why the idea of her being wrapped up in secrecy, whispers, and alleged betrayals has rattled fans to their core. People aren't just shocked, they're offended. Because when someone you trust gets pulled into the mud, it forces you to question whether you ever really knew them at all. What makes this scandal hit harder isn't just who's involved, but how long people are now claiming it's been brewing. According to so-called insiders who magically found their courage once the internet caught fire, this wasn't some spontaneous chaos. This was allegedly a slow burn, glances that lingered too long, conversations that didn't quite add up, scheduling coincidences that were brushed off as work-related until they couldn't be ignored anymore. The type of details that sound ridiculous until you hear enough of them back to back and suddenly realize there's smoke everywhere. People are resurfacing moments that once seemed innocent. A shared event here, a mutual appearance there, a comment that aged poorly, a laugh that now feels forced. And in true internet fashion, every single frame is being treated like evidence in a courtroom drama no one asked to be part of. Screenshots are being zoomed into. Captions are being analyzed like ancient text. Even the timing of social media posts is now considered suspicious. Because in the court of public opinion, coincidence is just a lazy excuse. Kenya, of course, is being framed as either the bravest truth teller in the room or the most calculated chaos agent reality TV has ever produced. There is no middle ground. Supporters say she finally snapped after carrying other people's secrets for far too long. Critics say this is a desperate grab for relevance wrapped in manufactured outrage. And Kenya herself? She's playing it just vague enough to keep everyone guessing. No full denials, no complete confirmations, just enough breadcrumbs to keep the speculation alive and the pressure mounting. What's fueling this even more is the way old tensions are suddenly being recontextualized. Past arguments that once felt petty are now being reframed as suppressed resentment. Moments where Kenya appeared defensive are being reread as frustration from someone who allegedly knew more than she was allowed to say. And the audience, always hungry for a bigger story, is eating it up. Because nothing sells like the idea that the truth was there all along and everyone missed it. Meanwhile, Marc's silence continues to irritate people who want answers now. Not later, not through a lawyer, and not through a carefully worded statement. Every hour he doesn't speak, theories multiply. Is he being advised to stay quiet? Is there something legal happening behind the scenes? Or does he believe this will all blow over if he simply waits it out? In the age of instant reactions, waiting is interpreted as guilt, even if that isn't fair. Kandi's response, or lack of a clear one, has been just as polarizing. Cryptic messages about loyalty, betrayal, and peace are either being read as emotional damage control or subtle admissions depending on who you ask. Fans who once defended her unconditionally are now split down the middle. Some insist she is being dragged unfairly into a narrative designed to shock. Others argue that powerful people don't get questioned enough. And this discomfort is long overdue. What truly escalates this from messy gossip to full-blown scandal territory is the way sources keep appearing out of nowhere. Anonymous voices claiming first-hand knowledge. Supposed friends of friends who suddenly remember details they couldn't talk about before. Everyone has a story. And every story somehow connects back to the same core accusation that this wasn't an accident. This wasn't harmless, and this definitely was an unknown dot as the noise grows louder. The lines between reality, exaggeration, and performance begin to blur. That's the dangerous part. Because once a narrative takes control, facts become optional and feelings become evidence. The public isn't just watching anymore. They're participating, choosing sides, assigning motives, deciding who deserves sympathy and who deserves consequences long before anything is proven. And right at the center of it all is Kenya, standing in the eye of a storm she may or may not have intentionally created, watching as a single revelation fractures alliances, rewrites reputations, and forces everyone involved to confront a question they probably hoped would never be asked out loud. What happens when the story stops being about drama and starts being about damage? Because once the whispers turn into accusations and the accusations turn into investigations, the fallout doesn't stay contained. It spreads, pulling more names, more secrets, and more uncomfortable truths into the light as the narrative continues straight into what comes next without pause, without relief, and without any sign that the tension is about to let up. As this video begins exactly where this leaves off. The momentum doesn't slow down after that first shockwave, it accelerates. Because once the public accepts the possibility that something secretive may have happened, everyone suddenly becomes a detective. Forums light up. Group chats explode. People who haven't watched a full episode in years suddenly remember that one moment that now feels suspicious. And this is where the narrative gets dangerous, because speculation starts dressing itself up as certainty. Anonymous accounts begin popping up with confidence that feels rehearsed. They claim timelines. They claim proximity. They claim they saw things but can't show proof because of NDA letters, loyalty, or fear. Convenient reasons, of course, but reasons that sound believable enough to an audience already primed for betrayal. One account claims there were late-night meetings that were written off as business discussions. Another insists there were unexplained absences, trips that didn't line up with official schedules, and phone calls taken in private that suddenly make sense in hindsight. None of it is verifiable, yet all of it is persuasive when stacked together. What really pushes the story into overdrive is the sudden appearance of alleged documentation. Blurry images that look like clinic paperwork but could be anything. audio clips that are just clear enough to feel real and just distorted enough to avoid confirmation, messages that appear cropped, missing context, but emotionally loaded. The internet doesn't ask where they came from, it asks who they belong to. And once that question is asked, restraint disappears. People start accusing entire teams of being complicit, publicists, lawyers, assistants. The theory that this situation was managed becomes more popular than the idea that it never happened. Viewers argue that powerful people don't survive scandals by accident, they survive them through silence, settlements, and strategic distraction. Every delayed response becomes proof of coordination. Every vague statement becomes an admission disguised as wisdom. Kenya's role in all of this becomes more complex. Some now frame her not as the instigator, but as the final crack in a wall that was already crumbling. The narrative shifts from she started this to she exposed what others protected, and whether that's fair or not stops mattering once the crowd picks its version of events. Clips of Kenya from years ago resurface, moments where she warned about dishonesty, manipulation, or people hiding behind clean images. Those old quotes are now treated like prophecy. At the same time, critics dig just as hard in the opposite direction. They accuse her of weaponizing timing, of waiting until maximum impact before speaking. They question why this information, if true, didn't come out sooner. They point out patterns in her past where conflict coincidentally aligned with relevance. To them, this isn't bravery, it's strategy. And in their eyes, that makes every word she says suspect, regardless of its truth. Marc's continued absence from the conversation fuels the fire in a way no statement ever could. Silence becomes its own character in the story. People begin projecting motives onto it: fear, guilt, legal advice, arrogance, control. Every interpretation fits someone's bias, and none of them require evidence. His past interviews are now dissected frame by frame. Not for what he said, but for what he didn't. The pauses, the deflections, the body language. Suddenly, everyone is an expert in behavioral analysis. Kandi's situation arguably becomes the most volatile. Because her brand has always been built on transparency and work ethic, the suggestion of secrecy hits harder. Fans feel personally disappointed, even though they don't actually know her. Some rush to defend her, insisting this is character assassination disguised as tea. Others argue that being successful doesn't make someone incapable of mistakes, it just makes the fallout bigger. Her every post is now interpreted through suspicion. A motivational quote becomes a cry for sympathy. A business announcement becomes a distraction tactic. Silence becomes confirmation, and speaking becomes damage control. There is no winning move. Then come the reactions from the outer circle. Other personalities weigh in without naming names. Carefully worded comments about loyalty, truth, and accountability flood timelines. Everyone pretends they're speaking generally, but no one believes that. Viewers connect dots whether they exist or not. Suddenly, neutral parties are accused of taking sides simply by who they follow or unfollow. Even likes become political. The story grows so large that it starts consuming unrelated narratives. Past disagreements are dragged into the spotlight and reinterpreted as early warning signs. Old feuds are reframed as jealousy or guilt. Even moments of kindness are questioned as overcompensation. The scandal doesn't just rewrite the present, it rewrites history. What makes this phase especially chaotic is the introduction of alleged financial angles. Some anonymous voices suggest money changed hands to keep things quiet. Others claim opportunities were lost, contracts altered, and deals quietly renegotiated behind closed doors. None of this can be proven, but the idea that wealth was used as insulation fits perfectly into the public's understanding of how power operates. It feels believable, and that's all it needs to be. At this point, the conversation shifts from what happened to who knew, and that's where paranoia takes over. Fans speculate about inner circles, trusted friends, people who smiled publicly while allegedly knowing the truth privately. The idea that someone close helped maintain the illusion becomes more shocking than the alleged betrayal itself. Because betrayal from an outsider hurts, but betrayal from within destroys trust completely. The pressure builds to a level where inaction feels impossible. People start demanding statements, not out of curiosity, but entitlement. They believe answers are owed to them because they've invested emotionally for years. The comment sections turn aggressive. Neutrality is no longer acceptable. Silence is interpreted as disrespect, and yet, despite all the noise, nothing concrete lands. No undeniable proof. No official confirmation. Just a growing pile of suspicion, emotion, and expectation. The story lives in that uncomfortable space where it feels too detailed to be entirely fake and too unproven to be accepted as truth. That tension is addictive. It keeps people watching, refreshing, waiting, because everyone senses it. This isn't the peak. This is the build-up, the moment before something breaks. Whether that break comes in the form of a statement, a lawsuit, a leaked recording, or a complete collapse of the narrative, no one knows. But what they do know is that once it happens, there's no undoing the damage already done. And as the speculation tightens and the silence stretches thinner, the story pushes forward relentlessly into its next phase, carrying every accusation, every theory, and every unresolved question straight into what unfolds next without pause. As this video begins exactly where this tension leaves off, the shift from rumor to consequence happens quietly at first, almost politely, and that's what makes it terrifying. One day it's speculation, the next day words like legal, investigation, and liability start floating through conversations that were once fueled by memes and sarcasm. Suddenly people aren't just entertained, they're nervous. Because when stories reach this stage, they stop being fun for the people inside them. Whispers begin circulating that lawyers have been consulted. Not confirmed, of course, but heavily implied by sudden changes in tone. Posts get deleted. Comments are turned off. Statements become carefully neutral, stripped of emotion, crafted to say nothing while sounding important. To the audience, that shift alone feels like confirmation that something serious is happening behind the scenes. You don't bring out legal language unless you're preparing for impact. Some insiders claim meetings have taken place. Quiet ones. No cameras. No announcements. Just people sitting around tables trying to figure out how to control a narrative that already escaped them. Allegedly, options are discussed, denials, clarifications, strategic apologies without admissions. And in the most dramatic versions of the story, potential lawsuits meant to scare people into silence. Whether any of that is real almost becomes irrelevant because the public believes it is. And belief is powerful. The idea of official investigations, even hypothetical ones, sends shockwaves through fan communities. People start asking who could get involved if this spirals further. Networks, brands, business partners. Anyone remotely connected becomes a potential casualty. Viewers speculate about contracts with morality clauses, about deals that could be paused or pulled if the scandal grows too loud. The conversation moves from gossip to money, and that's when it stops being abstract. Kenya once again finds herself at the center of it all, but now the tone around her changes. She's no longer just dramatic or messy. She's dangerous, not in a villain way, but in a truth exposes power kind of way that makes institutions uncomfortable. Supporters paint her as someone who finally refused to carry secrets that weren't hers to protect. Detractors insist she lit a match and walked away, knowing exactly how flammable everything was. Marc's silence, which once read as calm, now feels calculated to some and panic to others. The longer it lasts, the more people assume it's strategic, that he's been advised to say nothing because anything he says could be used against him in a court of public opinion or an actual one. Others argue the opposite, that silence signals confidence, the belief that this storm will pass like so many internet fires before it. Either way, his absence becomes symbolic. He's not just a person anymore, he's a void people project their fears into. Kandi's situation becomes increasingly precarious as brands and fans alike start watching closely. Even without proof, association alone can make people nervous. Supporters argue she's being unfairly dragged into chaos created by someone else. Critics argue that accountability doesn't disappear just because someone is successful or well-liked. The pressure on her isn't just emotional, it's professional. Every move is scrutinized for signs of distancing, preparation, or defiance. What makes this phase especially volatile is the rise of moral judgment. This stops being about what may or may not have happened and becomes about what people think should happen. Calls for consequences grow louder. Some demand apologies. Others demand accountability without even defining what that means. A few take it further, suggesting people should lose platforms, opportunities, and respect based on allegations alone. The line between justice and punishment blurs fast. Then comes the paranoia. Fans start suspecting everyone. Who knew? Who stayed quiet? Who benefited? Innocent interactions are reinterpreted as suspicious alliances. Even people who say nothing are accused of complicity. It's not enough to be uninvolved. You must actively disassociate or risk being dragged into the narrative. The scandal becomes a social minefield where one wrong step can change how you're perceived overnight. Behind all of this is a growing sense that the story is no longer controllable. Even if every allegation were denied tomorrow, the damage is already done. Trust has been shaken. Reputations have been questioned. Relationships, real or perceived, have been redefined in the public eye. That's the part no statement can undo. Once people imagine a betrayal, they don't easily forget it. Some begin speculating about long-term fallout. Could this change how certain people are cast, booked, or promoted? Could it quietly close doors that will never be publicly acknowledged? In industries built on image, perception often matters more than proof. Being controversial isn't always bad, but being associated with secrecy and manipulation can linger in ways no one wants, and yet, for all the talk of consequences, there's still no final answer. No definitive reveal. No moment where everything clicks into place. The story exists in limbo, sustained by anticipation. People keep watching not because they know what's true, but because they're waiting for clarity or chaos, or both. The most unsettling part is the possibility that the full truth, whatever it is, may never come out. That this ends not with a bang, but with exhaustion, with people moving on while questions remain unanswered. In that scenario, everyone loses something. The audience loses closure. The individuals involved lose control of their narratives. And the industry loses a bit more trust. As the noise slowly shifts from explosive to heavy, one thing becomes clear. This was never just about one allegation or one livestream moment. It was about power, perception, and what happens when secrets collide with an audience that feels entitled to everything. Whether this story ends in vindication, silence, or something even messier, its impact is already locked in, because from this point forward, nothing goes back to normal. Every interaction will be viewed through suspicion. Every success will be questioned. Every silence will be analyzed. And somewhere in all of this, the regional question still hangs in the air, unanswered and unsettling. What if this is only part of the story? And what happens if the next reveal doesn't just shock the internet, but permanently changes the people at the center of it all? Before you click away, ask yourself this one thing. If even a fraction of what's being alleged here is true, would you really want to miss the moment when everything finally unravels? Because stories like this don't just disappear. They either explode or they get buried, and both outcomes change everything. The silence, the cryptic posts, the sudden shifts in behavior, none of it feels accidental anymore. And the next move could come from anywhere. So now it's on you. Do you think this was a calculated exposure or a reckless emotional outburst that went too far? Is this a case of powerful people protecting themselves, or the internet creating a monster out of speculation? And most importantly, who do you believe right now, and why? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because this conversation is far from over, and the smartest theories often come from the audience watching closest. If you're seeing patterns others are missing, say it. If you think everyone's being played, explain how. And if you believe the truth hasn't even scratched the surface yet, you're probably not alone. Make sure you like this video if you want the next update the moment it drops. Subscribe so you don't miss what happens next, and turn on notifications. Because if another receipt leaks, another statement drops, or someone finally breaks their silence, you'll want to be here when it happens.